2021, four men got together to make a radio show that nobody asked for. This is the result.
Welcome to Broad Street Radio. I'm Michael Morris with Stan Willis of Willis Spangler Starling. Did you just wave at the camera? I forgot that this is not only a podcast, we are actually filming it. This is the first time I forgot that. I should say that all the boys, Bill, Scott, and Jonathan are not here. We sent them assignment down to the border to register them as Democratic voters. So they'll be back in the country soon. They'll be back on the show. That's not funny. The voting isn't funny in this country. Okay, Stan? Speaking of things that aren't funny,
the good news is they don't have their IDs with them, so it'll be okay.
They don't. They don't even have a water bill.
They won't be able to get on the airplane to get back, but they'll be able to vote, so it'll be all right.
But as long as they don't come from Guatemala, it's fine. I want to get into human rights violations, and we have to go to social media because Nigeria...
I think this show might be a human rights violation.
This is, but here's the thing. In Nigeria, they can't watch this show if we put it on Twitter because Twitter has been banned in Nigeria because, and I'm not great, I don't know if it's the king, the president, or whatever of Nigeria. Yeah. I don't pay attention to their politics. But Twitter arbitrarily just chose to take a post of his down. So we've been dealing with censorship in this country, and I think it's a good thing. Stan, do you agree?
I'm not a big fan of censorship.
Then you are canceled.
Okay.
I'm canceling you and I'm banning your posts. How do you...
I've been thrown out of better places by better people.
Mark Zuckerberg does not agree. Here's the funny thing about this. What gets you censored or gets you strikes on social media, you don't really know.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm going to...
It's like... So I have some friends that like come from the Middle East, right? And what most of them have said about...
You mean like Wyoming?
Yeah, the Middle East. So like
that's what I said.
More like Massachusetts.
Oh, that's the Midwest.
Yeah, there you go. See, you're going the wrong way. And they talk about like living in some of those dictatorships that they live in, and the folks that I know from Syria say that living under Assad was one of those deals where you had. It wasn't as oppressive as we think it was. I mean, mostly you could do kind of whatever you wanted to do as long as you follow the rules, but you just couldn't say anything bad about him, the leader. So, that's what censorship is like. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't talk badly about the owner of the company. And,
right.
Then you're canceled or disagree with them. I mean, if you have a political viewpoint that's different from Mark Zuckerberg or any of those other
Jack Dorsey. Have you seen Jack Dorsey? He looks like Abraham Lincoln if he forgot his hat. He has that really big beard. No one looks like a terrorist more than Jack Dorsey.
Yeah, and he's kind of a recluse and twitches when he talks.
Yeah, he's an odd bird. You never see the other guy that created Twitter with him. I forget what his name was. Let's call him Bird Guy since he came up with the logo.
Bird Guy, yeah.
I can't remember his name. It's something like Brick Tamlin or something. I can't remember. Nate, do you know that guy's name? Anyway, douchebag. Yeah. Point being that these guys are deciding, the Silicon Valley techs are deciding what we can and can't post.
Right.
Is that a violation of our rights or let's just say freedom of speech?
Well, I think it probably is.
I should have said this. I'm sorry, Stan. So you are a lawyer. You do know these things.
I play one on TV.
Yeah.
I have this degree, but I didn't put it up on my wall. It says that I can, and then I have this certificate that says I can practice law.
Perfect.
And they haven't taken it away from me, which is surprising, but
yet.
That's good. Now, so I cut my teeth on political stuff in the late 70s, early 80s. So I was on the back end of the civil rights movement and the kind of anti-Vietnam stuff. And at that time, if you were a liberal, the liberals were wanting everyone to have free speech. They were wanting everyone's ideas to be introduced. And so the liberals were big on the first 10 amendments. And so I became a liberal because I liked those first 10 amendments. I think that everybody should be able to say, especially politically, what they believe. And I think that, honestly, the way it's supposed to work is everybody says what they said, and the best ideas kind of rise to the top. the worse ideas, fewer people follow them, and it kind of works that way. That's the way it's supposed to work in our world. I think in the culture now, what's kind of, because I'm a lifetime Democrat. My grandfather, great grandfather, my father, they're all lifetime Democrats. So
and they're still voting even though they passed on.
They probably are, yeah. Anyway, so I am a little bit surprised by the way the Democratic Party is kind of embracing this cancel culture or whatever, because essentially all of that is just censorship. All of that is just saying, I don't like your idea, therefore you shouldn't be allowed to say it, period. I mean, that's what they're saying. But, back in the 70s, the Democrats, we were the ones that were saying, the ACLU argued the case in Chicago where the Ku Klux Klan wanted to march, and Chicago said, no, you can't march. And it was the ACLU that took that case and said, even though we don't like your ideas, you have a right to express your political viewpoints. And, it's just odd to me that now we're talking about things like hate speech and these sorts of things, which are just kind of a way to tell people that disagree with us, shut up, we don't want you to talk. And I think it's dangerous. I think it's incredibly dangerous. And the really dangerous thing about it is, all these ideas sound good when your side's in control.
Right.
But the reason for the Bill of Rights and the reason for all the freedoms is to protect the people who aren't in control. And these things ebb and flow. And so, in the 70s and 80s, when the Republicans were kind of in control and they didn't want, the conservatives didn't want anybody who disagreed with them saying anything, they were big fans of censorship, right? And the Democrats, we were the liberals. And so now the Democrats are kind of in control of things, and now all of a sudden they're wanting to censor things. So it's dangerous to do that because of the ebb and flow, I think.
Well, I do think you're bringing up a good point, because when things swing a different direction, it can be used against you. I think the difference being the censorship, for instance, when the disease that will not be named, when you posted things on Facebook, even as a joke, you would get this warning label put on there, and then if you accidentally clicked on it, it took you to research about what was going on.
Right.
That's fine if you're pushing that narrative down people's throat that this is how this developed, this is wrong, this is wrong. Like this whole fact checker thing came in for Twitter and Facebook. Mm-hmm. Well, what's funny is as time has moved on, we found out those weren't really the facts.
Right.
So if you were pushing a conspiracy or a narrative a certain way, now it's okay to criticize. But it's after the election is over. It's after power is transitioned. And it just seems to me that you can still have things taken down. Like the best example, I was telling Nate and some of the guys, I like to doctor headlines. So, for instance, it was Barbra Streisand's birthday. The New York Post put it out. And so I took the headline and put Fabio's picture there. I was banned from Facebook for 30 days because somebody got upset about it, okay? So for 30 days. For something that it could be construed.
Because somebody was going to look at that and think that was actually Barbra Streisand.
Listen, had I seen it, I would have thought she held up very nicely. She looks like a melting candle. But people are upset, apparently, but that's kind of gone away. That's and then funny. There was another post where I was responding back and forth to a person in their comment section. Mm-hmm. Where he was referring to the Honky Tonk Man, the greatest intercontinental champion of all time. We'll all acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And I literally said, if you insult the Honky Tonk one more time, I will beat the shit out of you, as a joke. I got a 7-day ban for talking to a friend of mine underneath there. I could still see on Facebook.
It's because of your violent streak.
It might have been, but it might have been because people don't want to acknowledge the Honky Tonk Man did have a 1.5 year reign before the Ultimate Warrior, but I don't want to get into that. The point being, underneath it, I see hate speech about how all white people need to be retrained and all that. How is what I said more offensive than people classifying an entire race and saying that they're like, that's literally saying these people are evil. This thing that's funny between two friends should not be seen. This person shouldn't be allowed to post. You can't pick and choose when you want to dole out your justice.
Well, and I agree with you there, and I think that ultimately is the danger. The danger of all the censorship is the fact that sooner or later you might not be in power, and so it might not be your views that are being presented as the viewpoint of everybody that everybody has to have, and it might be your views now that are getting censored. And the idea, the reason for the first 10 amendments is because Thomas Jefferson read the Constitution and said, "This is scary. we need some things in here to protect people." I mean, honestly, that's what it was for. And the first 10 amendments are all about protecting, the freedoms that we want here. And you have the right to not be searched and have your property taken by the police at random.
Even though they do it, go on.
That's the Fourth Amendment. It's been so whittled down over the years that it's almost non-existent. But they put that in place because that's what England was doing. They were stealing all the stuff they were smuggling, and they didn't like it. so they wanted that in there. I mean, you have the right to freedom of expression and religion. I mean, if your religion is the dominant religion, you don't care about that so much, right? Because you're going to be in charge, and so you're fine. But if at any time that your religion isn't the dominant religion in the country, you want the right to freedom of expression, because otherwise you could be shut down, right? I mean, all of those amendments are in there for these purposes to protect us really from the majority. That's the idea. The idea that Jefferson had was to keep the majority from being the tyrannical ruler.
How do you feel about the fact that censorship is, I don't want to say it's only working one way, because I don't want to say it's just working on Republicans or Christians or any of that. But I do find it that people can publish articles. Like now we're looking back a year later. And if you're looking at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all of these, Newsweek, touting Dr. Fanucci and how he knew everything and follow him, and you're finding out this is wrong and that he omitted things.
Is that the proper pronunciation?
His name is Dr. Fanucci.
Fanucci?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm afraid if we say Dr. Fauci, we will get censored.
Get censored? Okay.
They take that out, not the Fanucci part. When you look back, and this guy, between he and Cuomo, Whitmer, all these people that were put to the top of the pedestal, when you find out that these articles, I'm not talking about the people, I'm talking about the articles, that they are factually incorrect, that they are fitting this, buy this newspaper, watch this news program, all this, that no one's fact checking that. There's no check and balance. Right. So the New York Post actually got their Instagram and Facebook account suspended for like 30 days leading up to the election because of Hunter Biden's laptop, which I'm pretty sure he bought at Best Buy. I mean, that's the only place you could buy a good laptop at a decent price. I'm saying if you're a political figure.
Yeah, I mean, where else would you go? I mean, honestly.
That's my point. Shout out to Best Buy.
Costco, maybe. I mean,
you don't buy computers at Costco. That's where you get like cartridges.
I bet Hunter does.
Oh, there you go. Well, those things were censored.
By the way, did you see the thing about Hunter's tweets and stuff?
First of all,
I mean, if I did that, I'd be canceled. Sure.
You know what my first thought was? That all the text between us, I know I never thought to use that N-word, Nigerian. And I thought, why would you ever even text that as a joke?
Right. I mean, there are just some things that even I find not funny.
Right. Like that's the one word you can't use at any time. I always find it odd if you're on Instagram, because everybody's a model on Instagram, all these girls that are dancing these songs.
I know I am.
Well, yeah, that's why you're on this show. But when you're scrolling through every other word in these, let's call them quote unquote songs, because they're garbage, and they're just sitting there dancing to it or whatever. And I'm just like, I cannot imagine that you listened to the lyrics of this and said, I want my face and my arse attached to this music. But it stuns me that you would even use that word.
Right.
In a text message.
Completely shocking.
Now, I would use your phone to text someone else and use that word, because that's funny.
That's the kind of guy you are.
Yeah, right? I'm a good friend. But again, that article would have been censored last year because it would have been, this is missing. My favorite is this is missing factual information.
If there's, and you know, I like I said, I'm not a big fan of censorship, and I don't like the hate speech, and I think that's a tough. It's tough to start walking down that road. But you know, if anything should be censored.
Totally agree.
Something like that is something that I mean something. I mean, it almost has no point. It's not political speech. It's not the only point of that is to insult somebody.
Right.
There's absolutely no other reason no other reason, religious or otherwise, for throwing that out there.
I just think it's odd. Like, what is the point of doing this in the first place, other than a political skew?
Right.
Because you're not censoring this other stuff.
Right.
You know, and
you know, you were talking about the articles and stuff earlier, and then I interrupted us with the Hunter Biden thing, which was kind of an interesting rabbit trail.
Well, I did want to get to that though.
But the thing about all this political rhetoric and the I won't say they're false, but the exaggerated nature of the articles in newspapers and things like that, none of that's new. I mean, if you go back and do research,
please say Operation Mockingbird.
I'm not going to say that, but you can say it. But if you go back and do research back into, you know, the earliest presidential elections in the late 1700s, early 1800s, there was all kinds of harsh political rhetoric, and there was all kinds of weird accusations flying back and forth. So none of that's new. I think that part of what's going on is we have so much immediate availability of information now that all of those things are just exaggerated because, you know, there's just so much information all of the time that, you know, things that it used to take years for somebody to present an idea and then have somebody quote it and then have somebody quote that. And then before that would become something that people took as axiomatic because they're quoting everybody. Shoot, now we can do that in 2 days.
Right.
Because of all the information and everything that's being published. So it's, I think just the volume of information makes it difficult to sort through things, and it makes all this stuff more prevalent in everybody's mind. But you know, this type of rhetoric and this type of thing isn't new to the political arena at all. It's been around for a long time.
Well, I think to that point, what's the phrase where you're drowning in information and lacking in substance? Right. Everything has become like this faucet, and I'm turning it on full blast, and it's somebody is deciding when to kind of dial it back and only let so much through.
Right.
So you're not getting any dissenting opinions either way. So remember, the whole thing was trust the science, whatever it might have been. These are the people we've anointed to be the top of this. I think it would be hard for Rachel Maddow to leave her softball team and come on her show and say, that's not funny. It is funny. For her to come on and say,
sorry, I should be censored. Nate, can you censor that out?
Censor his laughter. Actually, amp it up. When she's on there talking to Fauci and he's gushing about how he was held back, they wouldn't let him come on the show, but he really admired her. This is a paid public official on a broadcast network where they basically are in agreement on everything. If I'm Rachel Maddow, how do I turn around and I can no longer attack this person because I'm not objective? The news was never objective. Newspapers are never objective. They all have their bias and lean a certain way.
Absolutely.
We understand that. We at this show understand that. A lot of people will watch this because they want to hear what they want to hear. Tell me that I'm right. Like, back up my opinions. Mm-hmm. They literally, CNN has this meter that literally they can measure by the minute. And Brian Seltzer, I don't know, he looks like an egg. He looks like the kid that fell off the wall and they couldn't put him together.
This is the guy, you're talking about the guy that put the selfie of himself in his underwear on the show, right? This is the guy.
That might have been him. The guy looks like a big egg. He's missing hair.
Okay, I know who you're talking
but he's always in tears about what he's talking about. He's supposed to be there. He worked at the New York Times. as their media consultant guy. So he would talk about if Conan's ratings were going down, all these deals, and CNN put him there, and he was going to be their objective media guy.
Oh, okay. I don't watch CNN. So.
Nobody does. But I was in an airport getting some Haagen-Dazs, and I'm like, oh, look, this fat
I can
kid's
tell
on
you,
there.
there's something else I saw the other day. There was an article on Zero Hedge, to tell you the kind of news I read, where I forget who wrote the article, but they said that both MSNBC and CNN mentioned Trump more than they mentioned Biden now.
Right. But do you know why they do that? Because when they
Trump has ratings and Biden doesn't.
Absolutely. But when they put those articles, everything in media is based on how much money they can make.
Right.
So if they can get you to click on it, they get paid. Right. Because the ads start, right? If they put a thing about Biden, what are they going to say? Because they're not reporting on Biden.
Right.
Trump literally, there's a picture where it looks like he has his pants on backwards. Okay. That had more traction than Kamala Harris going to Guatemala. Because again, all you're seeing is somebody at a podium. I feel like we went back to when we didn't know what politicians were doing and we believed in them.
Right.
Because you didn't really know what was going on. And that's what people want. They wanted that return to normalcy.
Right.
I don't quite understand why, if things are so corrupt, you wouldn't want to know. This is like going to Mexico and the president's like, don't worry about it. And there's heads on pikes everywhere. This is brought to you by the commission from Cancun. Go visit there. Don't leave that area. But those people don't know what's really going on in their country. And then they're stunned by the violence. They're not talking about anything. They're not doing anything. And if you look at the Democratic Party, like what they're in control, they're doing the same thing that was being done for 4 years. Nothing's being changed. But the story coming out is still about the last 4 years and how terrible that was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're not going to walk back and say, I would respect somebody if one time they said, hey, we got it wrong. Like newspapers print retractions and they're behind the obituaries. You know what I mean?
No, they're not even, they're kind of intermingled in there.
Right. So it's kind of like, hey, we got one wrong.
It's like, John Doe, oh, we got something wrong. Then, Sally.
Right. That I don't understand where there's no limit to this, because I guess I should ask you this question. Do you think that these social media companies should be broken up like utilities are broken up?
Well, I think that's probably what's going to have to happen sooner or later. I mean, the whole point of the antitrust laws is because back in the day, there were companies that had more money than the federal government
and still do.
Yeah,
I think you and I have more money than the federal government.
Well, but we can't print it, so
we can in my basement for a few $100.
I guess you probably do have as much money.
There you go.
I don't have as much money as they do. I don't have as good a printing press. But excuse me. But I think I think that sooner or later you're gonna have some move to either make the social media the same as like AEP, public utility, and so then that would impose on them some quasi government restrictions. And so, because right now the argument is that it's a private company, so they can censor whatever they want because they're a private company. And I think unless there's some special legislation, I know like in Florida, we talked about this earlier.
Oh, bring that up because there's some people that won't know. Go ahead and tell them.
In Florida, they actually passed a law that said basically any social media medium that operates in Florida, so it's all of them, that they can't limit the access of any political figure. So basically, if somebody's running for office in Florida or for national office, they can't, Twitter can't cancel them. And if they do, then they'll have all kinds of potential repercussions from the state of Florida for doing that. So I think eventually either all the states will get together and do that, or the federal government will make a move to kind of make those more like a public utility.
I never understood why. In the beginning, here's the bad part. I think whenever you create something, it's like your kid, right? But as it starts to spin farther and farther away from the center of what it was created for, I mean, Zuckerberg, if you watch that movie, that was all about him meeting chicks, right? And if you saw that mongoloid, you would understand he needed a different way to do it. But these other companies...
I understand that he actually has 2 different colors of hoodies, so...
Listen, I love that the guy dresses like a janitor and has more money than anybody. But what I don't understand is where this has spun out to where these guys have become like Lex Luthor, right?
Right.
Like you almost hate that they exist, but they created something that really, it connected all of us.
Right.
It used to be about looking at pictures of people's kids and their food. Mm-hmm. Now it's everybody's political opinion. And it's always the kid that barely got through high school that, you know, he's changing your oil and he's going to tell you why gas prices have gone up. And it's like, I know that you're an economist today, but it's like everybody has their opinion. It's okay if they're all wrong because you can skip right by it. But instead, we're not choosing to skip by it. We're choosing to delete their opinions. And that's wrong.
Right. I agree. You should be allowed to, I mean, like I always say, everybody's entitled to their wrong opinion. It's just the way it is. In our world, we have created a world where we say, you know, you're allowed to have those, you're allowed to express those opinions. And I think that's the right thing to do, the right way to be. I don't think that censoring people or shouting people down or canceling them is the way to handle dissenting opinions. But the other problem is I don't think our culture is very adult-like. I mean, you know, in an adult world, you can sit down and have a conversation. People can come to differing opinions, and you can agree to disagree and still get along. And I think for most of us, if someone disagrees with us about something, especially something that we hold passionately, we just can't associate with them anymore. Like it's, you know, like they become a pariah because
it's become very you versus me,
right?
When it shouldn't, and it's between family members, it's between friends. It should have never gotten to this point, but social media brought us together to turn around and create this civil war of ideals, not race or gender. It's just, you're an idiot because you think this way.
And the other part that's, I think, frightening, and the part that I do think is different than it's been in the past, because I think it's been growing steadily worse, is the idea that not only do I think you're wrong, but I want to impose my ideas on you.
Right.
Like I am so certain that I'm right and you're wrong that it's not just okay for me to believe differently than you, but I need to be able to force you to acknowledge that I'm right and you're wrong, and you have to do what I tell you to do. I mean, that's where we're living right now, is everybody's just, you know, everybody wants to be the nanny and tell everybody else what to do all the time. And that's not the way our country was founded. That's not the point of the Bill of Rights. Is we can disagree. I do my thing. You do your thing. That's life.
Well, Stan, I want to say this. You've been listening to Broad Street Radio, and I hope you get canceled on every platform and in person. And we will see you next week.